Hey guys, thank you for tuning in to this episode. I had Noah collection on the episode. This is a great episode. It's a little longer than normal. Before we um, do that, I just wanted to say a few words. Today, as you guys know, really a sad day to be an American. I'm coming here with a heavy heart, grappling with the news that has shaken many of us. Charlie Kirk, he's the 31-year-old conservative activist that many of you guys know, a prominent voice in American politics. He was tragically killed and shot at Utah Valley University. And I think it's important to reflect on this stuff. This loss is just not a headliner. It's a profound tragedy that touches all of our lives, families, and communities across our great country, the United States. First and foremost, my deepest sympathies go out to Charlie's wife, Erica, and their two young children and their entire family. No words can ease the pain of losing a husband, a father, a son, in such a sudden and a senseless way. Can only imagine the grief they're enduring right now, and I hope they find strength and support in the days ahead. To his friends, his colleagues, and his family, and the millions who admired his passion and energy, there is a moment of shared sorrow for sure. I know I enjoyed listening to Charlie, and I don't often or never try to bring politics to anything because this does not belong in anything at all. The loss of a father like this, regardless if you're on the left, the right, the middle, wherever you are, this is not something that's acceptable. He inspired a lot of people, so particularly younger folks. And he had an unapologetic drive and commitment to his beliefs. Again, whether you agree with him or not, his impact on political discourse was undeniable. But alongside the sympathy, I can't help but feel a deep frustration that we're here again, mourning another life lost to violence in a country increasingly fractured by division here in the United States. Charlie Kirk's death, when I was watching the news today, was described by the Utah governor as a political assassination. And it's a stark reminder of the rising tide of political violence in our country, unfortunately. From the assassination attempts on our president to attacks on public officials, we're witnessing a disturbing trend that threatens the very fabric of our democracy. It's maddening to think that someone's life can be cut short simply for speaking their mind, for engaging in the open exchange of ideas that should be the cornerstone of a free society. And that's what I try to do on my podcast, is exchange ideas with many of you. Charlie was known for his prove me wrong debates, where he invited disagreement and dialogue, even in the face of controversy. He really didn't shy away from tough conversations, and while his views sparked strong reactions, he believed in the power of debate to bridge the divides and bring people together. He was killed in the middle of such an event, on a college campus no less, a place meant for learning and growth, is a gut punch. It's infuriating to think that a single bullet could silence a voice, any voice, in a nation built on the principle of free speech. It's not about politics. It's not about politics today. It's about our humanity. But recognize that Charlie Kirk was a husband, a father, a friend, a person who poured his heart into what he believed. We can disagree with his ideas, his rhetoric, or his methods, but we cannot accept a world where violence becomes the answer to those disagreements. My frustration stems from the fact that we're losing sight of that. We're letting anger and division spiral into something darker, and it's tearing this great country apart. As we process his loss, I urge all of us to reflect on how we got here and what we can do to change course. We can all make a difference. Political violence is not the solution. It's a tragedy that breeds more tragedy. We need to recommit to civility, to listening, to finding ways to disagree without dehumanizing each other. Charlie's death should be a wake-up call, unfortunately, not a rallying cry for more division or retribution. To Charlie's family again, you're my thoughts. To our listeners, I ask you to join me in condemning this act and all forms of political violence. Let's honor Charlie's memory, not with anger, but with a renewed commitment to building a society where ideas can clash without lives being lost. Thank you guys for listening. And please hold your loved ones a little closer tonight. Enjoy this episode. I hope you guys like it. All right, guys, I'm back. Another episode, another week, two episodes a week I'm going for right now lately, which is great. And I have the pleasure of having Noah on from Noah Collects Soccer on Instagram. Man, I'm glad to have you. I'm good to see you, man. I'm glad to have you on. Obviously, we didn't get to meet at SoCo. I wish I had the time to do that, but we didn't get to do that. So this is our chance to really kind of dive in. Before I do that, are you going to the show in New Jersey in September?
I don't think so, because the big trip to Chicago, and then there's also Culture Collision in Atlanta, which is this weekend, which I'm going to. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to fit in the show.
Okay.
I'm excited about it. The Hooked on Soccer show in New Jersey. That's going to be awesome.
Culture Collisions this weekend, huh?
Mhm.
Are you setting up there? Are you just walking it?
I'll probably go just walk the show. I usually go. There's usually like 4 or 5 soccer tables, and a little bit. Usually, like sort of like sell a couple cards, buy a couple cards. Usually, there's like a few good soccer tables, but it's nothing like we experienced in Chicago. That's for sure.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing. Even though my time was limited there, but it was definitely a good time. So, for those that don't know you, you are on Instagram as Noah Collects Soccer, and then you're also on a podcast, the Primo podcast. That's Premo, and I think they can find that on Apple, on Spotify,
Yeah,
on.
was a guest on the Primo podcast, which is like another YouTube show. She's
Okay,
been that.
okay,
So
yep,
it was on like my sort of major PC is Zidane, and they've done some episodes about like some of the great stars of the pre-modern era, and I was like a guest, speaking about my Zidane collection. But that's great podcast.
cool, awesome. Yeah, for some reason I thought you were kind of a mainstay on there, but maybe I've
Well, no, I
listened to
mean,
your.
those guys are definitely like, my sort of like best buds in the hobby, and sort of we always chat
Okay,
and hang out in the
maybe
vintage Discord.
and maybe I've listened to that episode more than once. So don't tell them that, but maybe a few times. I'm glad. One of the reasons I have you on is obviously I think there's a few podcasts in the space for soccer right now. By no means am I as prominent as the others, but I'm gonna get there, and I'm trying to address kind of every piece of the hobby we can. There's the collection part, there's the investment part, there's the buy what you like part. There's just so many different facets here. But one of the things that strikes me about you is obviously the 90s stuff, the pre-modern, as you call it, the pre-modern stuff, as we all know it as pre-modern. I actually call it vintage because cards didn't exist until the 90s in soccer. And the last few weeks, here and there, I sprinkled a little bit of my input on my thoughts on what's going to happen with this stuff from the 90s, and I really think it's going to explode because, again, and I hate to bring this theme up, but it's kind of like when people are coming and I suspect more people are going to be coming into the space over the next 8 months, right? I think we're just starting to see that kind of, and I had Slabonomics on the other day, but we're starting to see more people coming in. But I think as the Ronaldo stuff and the Messi stuff and the Lamine Yamal stuff goes through the roof, I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be saying, well, who's the other guys? When you talk about, and I think I talked to Slabonomics about this, is it's kind of like you look at Jordan, right? During Jordan's era, you had Bird and Magic, kind of those were the guys, and then Jordan came and was kind of the new guy, right? Kind of mid through their end of their careers. And that's why we talked a little bit briefly before this about Ronaldo R9, a guy that I don't want to talk too much about him because I don't want people to go out there and like spoil my hunting here, but there are so many stars from the 90s that, and even early 2000s, I'll include that in there too, because I feel like a lot of the guys came mid 90s into the early 2000s that were phenomenal players. And with Hooked on Soccer cards a few weeks ago, I told them I could take the best 11 from that generation to play today's 11, and that generation would destroy this generation. I think they would. I really believe that. I don't know if you
it's
agree
not
with me there, but
it's not unfair. I mean, you think about like who was in the sort of like Adidas commercials in 2002, and sort of like you think about some of those the greatest players of that era. And I think it's easy to get caught up in sort of like who's actually great, and then who actually might be of interest to people when they kind of get deeper into it. And so you definitely think of like the people with the most cultural impact, either that they won a World Cup or that they were like, I sort of think of sort of like a Beckham, Thierry Henry, Zidane, people who are still sort of in the limelight now, and who were, an R9, people who are kind of culturally relevant beyond soccer in that era. And that, people who come into the space sort of going, I'm interested in soccer now. And they're of sort of the age that I think many people like those Jordan collectors are. I assume that, if they can get past the sort of the initial funnel of Messi and Yamal and things, and they think back and they actually do get nostalgic for the era of soccer when they were younger, I think that those are some natural spots that they might go, no doubt.
yeah, no, I that's kind of the way I think. I mean, one of the things here to kind of, I'm trying to word this correctly, is kind of using the other sports and the lessons we've learned from the other sports and how we should collect soccer. Not say we should collect it the same way, but there are patterns to this game. And most of this stuff follows the same pattern. That's the issue. And I'm trying to identify them before others do, obviously, as many of us are. For, for reasons obvious. For me, it's kind of, there's a collecting aspect for me, and there's also a financial aspect where if I can sell some stuff to buy the big thing I want, then I'm happy. So like somebody like me, right? I want an R9 rookie. I want to find a really nice Zidane rookie. FYI, full disclosure, Zidane is the best player I've ever seen in my life. I tell everybody this. He's the best player. When somebody asks me who's the best player you ever saw play, I say it's Zinedine Zidane, and they go, "What?" I go, "Yeah." He's a player to me, watching him when I was growing up in the 90s, a guy that could control games without having to score goals. That's my thing. Um, but now, with the hobby, it's very different, right? We have people want to collect players that score goals. That's the, and if you have a very big marketing machine behind you, then like a Barcelona or something, then you're gonna actively perform well. So, when we talk 90s, right? Who are the guys that really stand out to you?
I mean, one thing I would say is, sort of the guys that we just were talking about. But one thing I think that's interesting that I think is worth pointing out about what you were saying was that sort of like we're talking about sort of like the market maturing. And I think it's like when you think about the progression of where people go, that I think you just have to think about what really moved people. Who was so like Zidane's a great example because he has some extremely iconic moments, right? Like he scores the insane
Mm-hmm.
goal in the Champions League final. He has the headbutt in 2006. He scores both of the goals to win the 98 World Cup. Like he has these super memorable things. Like David Beckham had a movie named after him. David Beckham has like insane highlights, right? Like I feel like he's an extraordinarily memorable person. I think like Ronaldinho is a great example of someone that like,
Yep.
if you're of that time, you're certainly thinking about those players. And where I was kind of going with the progression thing was, I think when a lot of people start, when I started, those were the players that I was the most excited about. And I think it bears out when you look at like the auto checklist in new sets. Like people are
Sure.
a lot of soccer collectors, that is who they're thinking about, like those great stars from the sort of recent past. And, to me, I think that a lot of times you sort of, you go there and you sort of see the autos and the case hits of today, and that can be exciting. And I still think that's fun. And that's still a part of my collecting and my sort of selling and stuff. I'm still interested in that stuff. But I think once you sort of are in it and you start thinking about what you're saying, looking at other disciplines, people aren't collecting non-playing days Michael Jordan cards, even though it obviously doesn't exist really, except for in like unlicensed upper deck or something. But you know what
Could
I mean?
win
It's sort of
champions.
like they're collecting his playing days, and they're collecting, rare, important, aesthetically beautiful Jordan cards. And to me, it's like that's where I see the translation, and I see it for those players who won World Cups. So, all the guys, that
Yeah.
in those era, when I think about sort of like 94 to 2006, I think of sort of like there's a lot of players in that era that were extremely notable and have, incredible accomplishments. And then there's actually, pack pulled autos and people don't know about like Mundi Chromo sets that have game worn patches, Dino game worn patches, right? They don't
Yeah.
know about, like the biggest thing that I talked about in that Primo podcast episode I have the original rainbow, which is from the 1998 Merlin set. And so that's up, you see it up here,
Mm,
3-card rainbow, base, gold parallel, and ruby to 100.
Ruby. Yep.
And if you're asking me where I think some people may look when they're sort of looking at what's interesting in Primo, if they've had their fill of their messy cards, or they're looking for some alternative places to look. That's the first numbered cards in a major set, right? 97, 98 upper deck. And Futera are doing some stuff with Juventus and Man U that has some numbering, but
Yep.
Merlin is the first.
Yeah.
That's really like a league wide release. And then the next year of Merlin in 99, they have the first one of ones in soccer. right? The
Mm,
blue one of ones. And then they also have the, they got the ruby, they got the same sort of and ruby gold and base parallel system. So, those I find to be extremely interesting. And I've got the Zidane rainbow, and that's sort of like the prize of my collection because I've got the ruby. And there's like
those
PSA
are
total pop
really,
8.
yeah, those are really tough to find.
Right. They're
Very difficult to
impossible.
find. Yeah, impossible. It's kind of like, I was, and not to stray off the player here or the subject, but there was a 2002 World Cup card that I was bidding on Golden probably 6 months ago, 7 months ago. It was a Rui Costa auto. Like it was a PSA 9, I think, whatever. I was like, I need this. And I put the bid in. I was like, there's no way anyone's paying over this. I think I bid like $800, and somebody came in at the last second and overbid. Like I shut it off. I was like, there's no way anyone's taking this card down.
Yeah.
Like nobody wants this. No, but somebody actually ended up, I think, paying almost $900 for that card because you don't find them anywhere. And for the longest time, I thought Rui Costa didn't sign anything until he started signing with Topps. Last year? And there it is. There was that card there. I'm like, what the heck, man? Where has this been? And I think a lot of that stuff was in Japan, right? Like those cards, even those rubies. I think those are a lot of them are there too, right? Talk to me
They
about that setup.
all
Talk,
all of those got released in Japan. So yeah,
yeah,
like 98 Merlin got released into Japan because of Nakata fever. Everyone
yep,
was excited about
yep.
Serie A at the time in Japan. So Merlin made sets there, Panini made sets there. And you're right, like the 2002 set, Matt from the Primo podcast, Mediocre Cards, he's got the R9 from that 2002 set,
My God,
actual R9 auto from his playing days. So that's definitely, I feel like, the thing to me that's the most exciting about Primo is some of the stuff that really connects to the things that people are interested in now, which is obviously like numbered cards, patch cards, autos, all that, or parallels.
mm,
I like other sets that it's more about condition rarity or the fact that just that a lot of them weren't kept or whatever. Some of like the Calcio sets and things like that. But the fact that there are those connections in the Primo sets is really cool and interesting. And I think like as I'm saying, I think as the space, if the matures, I
it
could
will.
see how that could be something that a lot of people become more interested in because that's how it was
Yeah,
for me. I was like interested first. Zidane kind of came out with some autos in 2002, and I was super pumped about it. But that if I would have realized sort of at the time that what was out there and sort of his earlier career stuff, I would have like been much more excited about that instead, right? So I think a
yeah.
lot of people may have that experience. That's kind of what I'm excited
That's
about in the space.
and that's the thing is that you know the stuff I mean, the stuff that comes out today is great, right? With the Legends autos and stuff. But I actually like you, I'm kind of like this stuff is not great. I don't like it. It's like it's cool, but it's like you're saturating the market with a player that's not playing anymore. And I really don't care.
You
Now that
get your
other
full of it. If you're really like in the collecting aspect of it, like listen, I'm not sort of like trying to be hypocritical. If you look at like behind me, these are all Legends autos from current sets. Like it's not that
yeah,
I'm suggesting that I don't like that. I just think, how many of those autos could you want? And so it's sort of like once you've picked a set that you really enjoy and you've got the auto of a few of your favorite players from some of those constellation of sets, where else do you want to go? And like you're saying, it just sort of like it just keeps coming. I think that's something that also comes from experience as you start to realize like, especially, what happens a lot of times is the player hasn't signed, isn't in modern sets. All of a sudden they become available, a few sets come out and those autos
sure.
go crazy. And then obviously like 2 years later, it's super easy to get that auto now. And it's not the same thing. You just have to be very cautious about that. And when you're
She
collecting ultra modern.
Yeah, they just don't for me it's kind of they don't feel special. That's the problem I have with it. Even active players right now, I actually don't want their autos unless it's a first auto.
Hmm.
That's like my thing. If it's a first year auto, I'll want it. But if it's after that, I don't care for it. I don't know. I just think we kind of don't value those first autos as much. It's kind of like a Ronaldo upper deck auto from that 2004 set, right? Those autos are going to be ridiculous money already. But
I
I don't
mean,
think,
you're just bringing up yet another sort of like those 2040 predict sets with some of like the gold parallels that are numbered to the player's number. I mean, there's insane stuff in those as well. I'm not as much of a Man U collector, but I have a lot of friends that I'm kind of tapped into that market, and that is a fascinating. You start to wonder, the CR7 cards, I think, are some of the first things that I think might topple in terms of a bunch of people coveting them. I think they're already
Yeah.
coveted, but becoming even more intensified as the market sort of people's education in the market grows. Um, you're absolutely right. Some of those early autos are very, very interesting. I mean, to me, and if you're talking about ultra modern, I think um, you can obviously just pick your poison in terms of something that you like aesthetically, but like obviously the rookie autos, and then like the on card stuff and some of the stuff from Immaculate, I think can be fun, and potentially have some sort of like staying power
Yeah.
in my mind.
Yeah. I just hate when Immaculate puts stickers on some of their cards.
Mhm.
I hate that. Like I have the João Neves of 3. I love that card. The patch is nice, but then again, I wanted something that was on card. So I got the patch when I bought recently, a 3-color patch auto to 50. I could have bought the of 10, but I wanted the of 50 because there's 3 colors on the patch. To me, that's more aesthetically pleasing to my eyes. So it's important to me. But that's the only João Neves auto I'm going to buy. I won't buy any more of them because they're second years. Why am I
Right.
going to pay? Why am I going to pay over $100 for a Topps Chrome? Yes, it's his first Topps Chrome auto, but it's not his first auto. That's kind of like how I look at things at this point. But the '90s stuff, going back to the '90s stuff, you know, Zidane is like those Zidanes up there. I'd rather have all 3 of those Zidanes than a Zidane auto from this year's product.
Sure. Of course.
That's just me. But most people, I would say 90% of people would say they'd rather have the auto. You know what I mean?
Sure. Well, that's like there's definitely, Slatonomics, and you spoke about this a little bit. There's definitely, I think, a little bit of a bias in the US market, which is the largest one, towards stickers. So, I think it took me a few years into my collecting journey to really start getting more excited about stickers. But it's like Zidane has a first card and Zidane has serial numbered cards in his playing
Uh-huh.
days. I mean, there's Futera cards that are numbered and have his, game worn patches in them that are during his playing years. It's like, there's some wild stuff that again, I think, like, I guess I would say it's so interesting to me because like one of the first big Zidane cards I got was a Kaboom. I got his first year Kaboom. But to
Great pickup.
me, it was just like awesome, right? Like I love that card, but it's interesting, in this last year's Donruss set, they came out with another Zidane,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's just like, in a different uniform or whatever. It was one of those things where I was still mildly excited about it. And full disclosure, I got that one too, just because I just love Zidane cards. There was something about that started to make me think like, well, they're just the next one's, how maybe next year there's going to be another Zidane kit in a different kit or whatever. And I think that's where you start again, or once you've been in it a little while, I think it becomes more interesting to go like, what's a little bit more limited,
Mm,
what's a little bit more interesting.
yeah.
And like you look at the pop counts on all of his first card, and his 1992 UNFP card, his Future Stars card, some of his very early cards, and then his early '90s cards, and his other stickers from the Panini Foot Run are awesome. And it's like what I would say if, I just don't want to just talk about what I'm interested in, but for like people who are thinking a little bit about the market, one of the things that is really cool is I reached out to Card Ladder and I was sort of like, listen, Zidane's one of the greatest players of all time. And they only had one sticker in all its grades. Like his 1998 World Cup sticker was the only thing they had in the index,
In
like
the
in the
index.
soccer index. So I got them to place like another like 14 of his stickers and cards, like all of the ones in the Primo era that I'm interested in. And that index, which is like almost brand new on Card Ladder, his player index is up 28% in the last year.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we've seen his Ruby sale, which is my purchase, but I like, obviously there was an underbidder there that was close to where I placed it, which is way up. There the PSA 8 had gone for 2,300 2 years ago, and my sale was 2,100 for a PSA 5. So you can just sort of see where the growth is there.
Yeah.
And the Maldini Ruby went for, I think it was 3.6K like a month and a half or 2 months ago. And it's just like it's the only, there's like no public sales. The Del Piero
Yeah.
Ruby went recently. I'll admit I picked that one up as well, and that one went up at a huge premium. Like it's wild because people are starting to understand what those are. And
Yeah.
so, and I think that year and the next year, I think you look at, it's not just Zidane, right? It's like you've got R9, you've got Totti, you've got Badigol, you've got like really intense, great players from that era and that Serie A era. So like one thing I would say is like I've been looking for. You were talking about like hunting for some R9. I've been looking for the gold parallel out of the '98 Merlin, where the ruby's from. And I was sort of thinking, well, that's a much more common, when you think about the pack odds and whatever. And I've never seen one for sale. And I've like asked
Wow.
around in my circles and vintage and stuff. And no one
Nobody,
knows,
huh?
no one sees. It's like it's hidden, tucked away in Japan. I think is the only thing I can kind of come up with. But
Have
uh,
you ever gone over to Japan to try to find some of these cards?
no, I mean I've corresponded with some people that are in Japan, and I've gotten like some really cool Calcio stuff, and like I've collected some of the Grandy sets from like '99. There was like, if people don't know, the Grandy subset is one of the longest running subsets in Primo, right? It's from, I actually have one. This is like '99 Calcio. This is the R9 Sparkly. And like, they did this from '99. I think it went all the way to like 2005 or 2006. And it was always like a subset of like the best strikers, from Serie A in that time, and like probably plus Maldini.
Yeah.
And so that's another interesting one, right? Like where it's like, again, you start to think about how people collect Michael Jordan, and you sort of go, if people start to look back, they get past sort of the onslaught of the modern stuff, like the case hit of the same guy over and over, and they want to like look
Yeah.
back at the sort of what they've got. There's some interesting parallels, sort of like what you said, to what people are sort of emphasizing in their collecting in other spaces. So
Yeah, it's like, I know you keep referencing Michael Jordan, but you could look and you could find like a PMG of like Alonzo Mourning, and it probably sells for like 3-4K. Hall of Fame player, but was he the best center of that era? No, but a very good player. But like, you're right, you could have a random ruby of a player that it's gonna fetch money. You know what I mean? It's gonna fetch money. And especially if you're a collector, if you're collecting that guy, like for me, it would be like, I'd be probably looking for a Rui Costa, right? And that's probably very expensive. I mean, I would say so. I would think it's probably very expensive, but it's just, again, it's kind of like following the lessons we're learning from the other sports. I mean, I dabble in hockey too, because I love hockey. And hockey's the same thing, man. These atomic refractors from the 90s, they sell for big money because and it's not like today we look at atomic refractor, big deal, but back then that was kind of an innovative new thing, but so it's kind of like, I get where you're going. And I think, but I don't think many people are thinking this way because again, like I told you before we came on, people get distracted by the shiny new stuff. And for
yeah,
me,
well, here's what I'd say, man, is like they're not wrong to think that like the hobby is based on hype. And so here I've got, this can be a long ranging conversation. I've got plenty of thoughts about modern and ultra modern, but
please, please.
another thing that I think is interesting about what we're talking about is that, all right, so one of the themes of a lot of soccer collecting or card podcasts in our space is what's going to happen when the 2026 World Cup rolls around. And one
Yeah.
thing that I've been thinking about that's a little outside of the box is, first of all, you've got the '94 World Cup is obviously the last time it was on U.S. soil, and there's going to be some nostalgia, and I assume some packages and maybe some documentaries or whatever about that. And it's also going to be the 20-year anniversary of the 2006 World Cup.
Yep.
So there's like sort of a couple different things going on there, and sort of like, to me, obviously as a Zidane guy, like the 2006 World Cup final and the semifinal against Brazil are sort of this very memorable part of Zidane's career. And then you sort of think back to '94 and the Baggio miss and sort of Romario's brilliance and some of those things, and you sort of wonder if that gets enough play on mainstream TV when lots and lots of people in the United States are watching that, if that will perhaps move the needle. And again, if the 20th year anniversary stuff of 2006, 2006 World Cup comes about, you've talked a little bit about it. I love the foils from that set, and you've got both CR7 and Messi's first World Cup card.
Yep.
Those are very interesting. So, and that, to me, that one, I think it's difficult to see those. There's a lot of those. I think that was a pretty well produced set. I mean, it's like super super beautiful. Here's just a Zidane one for fun, but anyway, like I feel like that's like an interesting play. I think the other thing is that I've been thinking about a little bit is, okay, so everyone's talking about this 71 bis and all the sales, and I would say that's almost like the top line headline, right? So
Yeah.
if you're again trying to think a little bit outside of that box, I think you can think about the other, other great stars from that same set. So, like I've got the obviously the Zidane from 2004 Panini Sports, and like also, you've got like the Mega Estrellas, which are like the green sort of almost PNG-esque insert set from that same, or subset from that same set. And it's got like Figo, and there's all kinds of crazy stars on that
Yeah.
subset. So like I just bring that up again. It's sort of like I can see how, again, as more and more people get in, if you're looking at the BIS, what else is in that set, or who are the other great players in that set, is sort of like an obvious to me sort of like lane. And you've talked a little bit about the Jordan card in the 1993 and 1994 sets, or the honorary captain. I think that's a super interesting play as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Especially the gold versions of that stuff. You know what I mean? I
Hmm.
just and I have an extra box that I want to open, but I just haven't done it yet. Um, but yeah, that like that upper deck set's great. Even though there isn't anything numbered in there, but it's still it's a fun rip. It's relatively cheap. There's legends in there. There's a Valderrama rookie in there.
Hmm.
There's a Figo rookie in there. And they're hard to grade. They're hard to gem. Those cards are hard to gem because a lot of those packs brick sometimes. So you have that kind of that sticky, the cards brick, you know what I mean? But I don't know. I just feel so, and usually, I'm an individual where I generally trust my gut a lot, on stuff like this. Some stuff I don't, but that's another story for another day. But I just have this like really like deep feeling that this is going to happen with the stuff from the 90s, and you're in a good position with those Edons up there. So those are going to be a lot of money at some point. Because again, I look back and you mentioned it early on, but like you mentioned the Adidas commercial. Do you remember the Nike commercial with Brazil and Portugal in that commercial?
Man, all time. I really
What
love all these old commercials.
Oh,
Yes.
those commercials are awesome. And then, I wish, and I think Nike, they re-released some of those jerseys the last year or so, the Brazil one, the Portugal one. I wish they had done that maybe during the World Cup or right before the World Cup, and maybe even re-release those commercials too. I think that would make it really fun, even though, Portugal's now a Puma country, but I think if people start watching that stuff, they're like, "Oh my God, I can't believe these guys are in this commercial. Look at all those stars in those commercials." You know what I mean? I don't think you could like I have a hard time thinking that Nike could make a similar commercial today and have the same
Not with
impact.
that many people, Roberto Carlos in the airport kind of thing. I mean, that
Yeah.
those commercials are so incredible. Yeah, it's a great, great reference. But and you're right. It would be interesting. Again, I wonder if that sort of stuff is going to come to light a little bit more as people get more excited coming up
I
to it.
mean I mean I mean
I think
those
it's important to say, like, I think that it's tough to ascribe that what's going to happen in the madness of the World Cup is going to be some sort of one way or another for the market. Like, I have no confidence sort of one way or the other about it. To me, it seems like a lot of people right now are speculating on that being the case. And like, so that's causing some of them, what we're seeing in the market. But it's like, it's interesting. Like, if you look at some content that like Cage Lawyers put out about repacks and how like setting high comps is just a benefit to them, and then you look at some of these consortiums that are playing in the space, I just like, it's really exciting to see all these numbers go up and see like the soccer index go crazy. But I think like you always want to kind of like be level headed and like look for inefficiencies, like the sort
yeah.
of some of the stuff that you've been pointing out about peacocks, about CR7, about all, there's different things out there that are interesting about that I think are organically, you can see, I think over time will correct perhaps in a positive way. But it's so interesting because I just think that's so prevalent. Like we all are excited to see what a lot of marketing will do to the space, but it's like, you know I don't know if I do think that because the World Cup happens in the United States that like Zidane's cards, playing days cards are going to go up or not. I'm not sure. I'm excited that it's possible, but it's interesting because you just wonder about true
We don't know.
correlation.
We
But it's
don't
such
know.
an
That
interesting time, right, Paulo? Because it's like,
is it is.
dude, because the stuff is going crazy and all of our predictions feel very prescient at the moment. right? It's like, so it's, I'm definitely like, it's interesting to try to go, I'm super excited and it's really cool to see kind of more and more people getting excited and
And
seeing some of the prices go up. But like, you do have to wonder what, what's really going on, you know?
yeah, and you brought up something interesting earlier where you talked about players that or former players like a Beckham or like even Tim Howard, for example, right? Guys that are still in the spotlight, but because if you look at the other sports, right, you got guys that are in the announcer booth or in the analyst booth. Like people don't realize this that A-Rod cards have actually gone up a little bit in the last year because he's in the spotlight. So now you have to think about this and say, well, the Champions League, as it starts to get more, and if the sport gets more popular here, this is what people got to think about. If the sport gets more popular here with the World Cup or even after the World Cup, because there's a lot of people that say, I only watch the World Cup. And I tell them, that's actually the worst soccer you can watch. And they go, what? What are you talking about? I go, the best soccer you can watch is the Champions League without question because they play together more often. Because then you're turning people that are World Cup fans into Champions League fans. And this is where it gets interesting because then you have, Del Piero, who's an analyst as well, Jamie Carragher, but nobody wants his cards anyways. But like, Del Piero for me is one of the guys that I loved in the 90s too. A player who's got he's got that gold rookie card and score that I
I
pointed out. I
love
pointed out.
I love that pick. I love, that's another thing you've talked about in the past. I love that one. There was like a really cool Italian dealer at Soko that had some of those early Del Piero cards, and I PC Del Piero a little bit as well because again, it's like if you were watching soccer at that time, he was just an incredible goal scorer and had a real nasty tongue celebration. Was just a great,
Mhm.
fun player that's very memorable. Like you're saying, him and Thierry Henry are on the Champions League coverage every week, and I think that that really helps because again, like you're seeing a package of them doing a goal celebration every now and again, even in current television. So like that's certainly a meaningful piece of it, no doubt, no doubt.
Yeah, and even like I even start to like everybody else. I look at 14 Prism, but I don't look. I look for me. I'm actually looking at U.S. players because I firmly believe that people are going to want to buy U.S. players from 14. They so for me that 14 Prism set is basically your 86 Fleer basketball set. Okay, I'm gonna say it right now, it's 86 Fleer. 20 years from now, that's what that set is, where everything is ridiculous money, no matter what the player is or who it is. Because again, people were buying stuff, they weren't putting it in top loaders or sleeves. So it's like some of those cards are hard to grade. You know what I mean? And
Absolutely.
even and the 90s stuff is even harder. You mentioned that Ruby up there that you have. Same idea. Stuff that's not easy to get, rare, and they go, well, I can't get that. How am I going to get, where do I get that? You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm excited, but I'm also kind of like sitting here going, no, I have to be smart and financially responsible. I can't dive in. So, I talk about this all the time, creating a list of what you want and you stay away from all the other stuff, all the distractions. You know what I mean?
That's right.
And what do you do? How do you stay? I don't want to turn this into an education chat, but how do you stay disciplined in your lane that you like? What is your strategy that you use?
Well, I mean, I think the one thing is just like you said, I think I've got sort of like some parameters that I've even taken the time to write down for myself about sort of exactly what I'm looking for and what I think my current lane is, and sort of like a ranking of the players that are the most important to me and that I've enjoyed the collecting the most. And then sort of, obviously have like a certain budget. And just like I think with a lot of people, I buy cards, I sell cards, I sort of like consolidate into bigger cards, sell cards that I thought were PC before, all that stuff. I'm triangulating just like everybody else, I think. But, to me, I think the best way to set boundaries is really to just go like, really, really like take your time and look through the universe of what there is. I think that's the way that I've gotten the most satisfaction out of collecting is sort of like actually understanding what's out there first and then going and looking at it all, making my own aesthetic judgments or, importance judgments and all that stuff. And
Doing your research.
yeah, look at and sort of like looking at some of the stuff you've talked about tonight. Fundamentals, like, is this the first set? Is this their rookie card? What about this is going to make other people interested in it? And like, I think for your PC, some of that doesn't matter, right? Like, I collect
Yeah.
some really weird interesting Zidane stuff just because like I love Zidane. I want to have all kinds of wacky, cool, oddball cards and stuff like that. It's not all about investing or whatever, but I think a lot of cards are more like, are more like a hybrid of that, right? It's like some of the cards I really like, and I think it's cool. It makes it easier for me to kind of like at least be very interested in the card. I don't buy too many cards that are purely, I know I'm going to sell them immediately. I think it's like part of my test is like, would I want it and would I want to hold on to it is part of my test for if I think that someone else might also feel that way.
Yeah,
If I
yeah,
would want to just immediately unload it. But I think that obviously everyone talks about 2014 Prism, and I think that the things I've been thinking about most in that set are again kind of I've watched a lot of Cajun cardboard, and again, that's why I keep bringing up Jordan. But it's like inserts are sort of not. You talk a lot about how base is disrespected. I always think that's funny, and I think one of the other things that is disrespected in the soccer card hobby is like inserts and numbered inserts as compared to the what everyone wants, the base parallels and the case hits is kind of what people want in Ultramod,
mm,
right? And so it's sort of like it's interesting to me in 2014. I really like the World Cup stars inserts and the net
I love
finders
that.
inserts, the aerial assault. Some of those are really great. Like this, I don't have this card, but like the CR7 aerial
Yeah,
assault is like
awesome.
sick. And like
Those
so
those inserts in silvers are so nice. All of
they
those,
are. They're
they're
beautiful.
so nice.
And I think that the color, with some color, those are really cool too. So I think like those I think are a little slept on. I think obviously not as much now if you're talking about Messi and CR7 and this
Yeah,
recent boom, but I still think even now I still think those are as respected as maybe they might eventually be if kind of people's habits correlate with some of the the habits of other collectors in other spaces. So I find those to be interesting. I think one thing, again, almost like you're saying, I hate to sort of talk about some of the stuff that are my own theories, but here we are. Let's let everybody know
let's
what we're
do
thinking
it.
about.
Let's do it.
I mean, to me, I've been looking a lot at 2015 Select,
Yep.
because I think again that's the like first set. I love like Select is one of my favorite sort of like modern sets. You and I have talked about some of the things that we like out of Select products, and obviously I think 2015 same thing. I like some of the insert sets in those. Some of those are really gorgeous and just have like really crazy. I like some of the wave stuff that they were doing in early Select. So 2015 and 2016 Select is like well known as beautiful sets, but specifically think from a fundamental level, 2015 is another one that I think doesn't get
Yeah.
talked about as much as 2014 Prism, 2014 Prism and 2017 Chrome and all that. So I think 2015 Select is an interesting one that I've been kind of dabbling in a little bit. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I actually love that because one of the cards that I love in that set is the Ronaldo white jersey card because you hardly see him in a Portugal white jersey kit. I think that's the only one, actually, to my knowledge. No other card set has him in a Portugal white kit. And that's kind of like probably useless knowledge, but I look at things like that on cards because they're unique. It's kind of like there's a card from Stadium Club that came out 3 years ago, maybe. It's a Trezeguet card. I don't know if you know the card. Do you know the card at all? Do you know the card I'm
Just
talking about?
I'm just Trezeguet from Stadium Club. I'm not sure if I know it.
So the funny part about it is Trezeguet, and in the background, right beside him, is Zidane, and he was not licensed with Topps at that point yet. So to me, that's always been an interesting card. I love that card. So I have like a base and I have a refractor of it, and if I ever see a numbered one, I'll buy it because I think it's a cool card. Because I think at times I think we get caught up in the like those Zidans, even if that wasn't a ruby up there that you have, even the base, like that card's beautiful that you have up there. And I
I
think,
never thought I was going to get the ruby, and like my big reach was the gold parallel, which there's only 11 of them in the PSA registry, right? Another
yeah,
impossible card to find. I never even thought the ruby was in play, and you're absolutely right. Like the base, which is silver, is like awesome and something I'm just as excited, very excited about in the same way. You're not wrong. It's interesting. I was laughing a little bit about some of you talking about sort of like some ultra modern base, but that's another cool thing about pre-modern is obviously some of those sets there is nothing else besides base, and some of
yep,
those are the most beautiful sets you've ever seen. Incredible puzzles, all kinds of like really neat foil cards, all that stuff in those sets, and they're all just a lot of them, it's almost just a function of how big the checklist would be. You know, there'd be 600 card checklist, so you wouldn't need, they'd almost like didn't need the numbering at that time because how many packs were you going to be able to get as a little kid, right?
Well, you got to remember those packs too. Like, so I opened quite a bit of Pro Set Premier League, chasing Roy Keane and Alan Shearer rookies because it was fun and they were cheap. You know, I can still get them once in a while around here, and I'll buy it because it's fun. They're hard to gem, but there's like 36 packs in those boxes. You know what I mean? I think there's 36. Like even the Upper Deck World Cup box, I think has got like 36 packs for some reason, and they're just fun. You open a lot of packs, you see all these cards come out, but you know, I guess my point is like going back to your 14 Prism inserts. I agree. Those World Cup stars, those cards, those silvers are unbelievable. Like I have a Buffon that's grading right now. Well, it's been there for months. But I don't care if that comes back a 7 or a 6 because those silvers just pop so hard. It's just crazy. And for me, Buffon's the best goalie from when somebody asks me who's the best goalie I ever saw, I tell them it's the only one that's never won a Champions League, which is Buffon. But then you understand that he also went down to the second division, 3B, with Juventus when they got in trouble, and that
Yeah.
says a lot about his character. You know what I mean?
Him
That's
and
kind of
Del
like,
Piero. That's sort of spoke
yeah.
to both of who they
Yep.
were. Yeah.
Those two guys. I mean, you know, let me go back a little bit, back into the 90s again, because I think we started to kind of
Yeah.
not stray because we're keeping this open. And just so everybody knows, we don't rehearse or script any of this. This is all off the fly. So we're doing this. You mentioned Del Piero, you mentioned Zidane, you mentioned R9. Anybody else from the 90s you think are significant? Like I have my ideas. I think you mentioned Henri too, but he was kind of early on, right? The later in the 90s.
Yeah. I mean, to me, at least for me, the era I'm interested in there is kind of that the middle of both of those decades, right? Like to me, the most interesting eras for me were sort of I started paying most attention to soccer in '94, and it's that sort of like '94 to 2006, 2010 kind of eras, the era
I
that
think
I
that
think
was
I was watching
I
the
think
most soccer. I was playing soccer. I was playing, you know, high level club and high school soccer, and just soccer was such a big thing in my life. The most nostalgia for that period.
I think that era is probably the best.
Yeah.
I mean, I could argue that that's probably the best era of the last 30, 40 years.
I mean, the reason that we're not just old guys saying our era was great, I think is when you actually look at it, it was just there was a lot more room for like characters and artistry in that time period. And there was just like there was guys that were doing incredible things and you know, it was just there was a little more style. It was just it was a different era. It was a little less robotic and you know, that played out in a way that the game was you know, it was very beautiful style of play in that era.
Yeah, because
But I mean,
the game's changed a lot, right? It's changed a lot, but and that's why like even with the young kids, I talk to some of these young kids sometimes. I say, you guys have no idea what you missed out on. You know, Ronaldinho. I mean, I talk about Quaresma a lot. Ricardo Quaresma. I mean, you watch this guy on the ball. It was like watching a wizard. You know what I mean? I actually I did a podcast with Coach Co probably 2 years ago, and I called him. I said, you know, because he's a Porto fan. I don't know if you know this. Coach Co's actually a Porto fan, and he loves Ricardo Quaresma. And I said, you know, who he reminds me of? He reminds me of Allen Iverson. That's who he reminds me of. Just a guy that was culturally significant in Portugal. And you may not know this because you maybe didn't watch a lot of Portuguese league, but a
I
guy
saw
that showed up.
Porto in person at the Club World Cup this year. I saw Mora
Oh,
do his
they
thing against
is
Messi. So I've scouted Porto myself this year.
very nice.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Who did you like on Porto besides Mora?
I mean, Mora was the most impressive, honestly. That he was the one that gave me the biggest impression in that game. There was like
Yeah,
no question.
he's their most talented player for sure, for sure, for sure. They've got a few
But
good
sorry, I didn't
ones.
mean to interrupt. So Coach Co was talking about
Yeah, so I told him he reminds me of Allen Iverson. I
yeah,
told him that. He was like, "Oh, you know what? You're probably right." You know, because he would show up to the stadium dressed the way he wanted to. He had cornrows at one point in his life too. It was just one of those guys that and people don't realize this, that he was actually the bigger prospect over Ronaldo at Sporting. He went to Barcelona at a really young age. If we look back, Sir Alex almost took both of them from Sporting. And I kind of wish he had gone to United instead of Barcelona, because I think if he goes to United, I think him and Ronaldo, it changes things for Quaresma's career. Although he did come do late, didn't perform well at Inter, was really good at Porto, and his second stint back in Portugal was really good at Besiktas. But and then for Portugal in 2016 when he won the Euros, he came due there. So I mean, he's a guy that people are always talking about lately. Actually, hooked on soccer. I ran a poll the other day on Luis Nani or Charisma, and I was like, man, that one's tough. That
That's
one's
really
really
tough.
that one's really hard to watch because they were both wizards on the ball. I actually think Nani's probably if Nani of that era played at United today, he'd still be their best left winger of the last 10 years. I don't know. It's hard to say, but yeah. So again, going back to our original thing was kind of Del Piero, Zidane, R9, Thierry Henry. Who else? Anybody under the radar that you think about that people don't? I mean, people probably know about, but they don't think about that often. Like I always think about Batigol a lot.
Sure. Sure. I think that's reasonable. That's a good one. I watched your episode. That was a great, interesting episode. I mean, to me, you got Totti, obviously, is another great one.
Yeah,
I think you can, like you said, you can think about some of those greats from that Man U era, sort of like Scholes, Giggs, Beckham. You can kind of take your pick. All those guys, I think, are still relatively culturally relevant. In a lot of different. I think they also just that they have a relatively strong collector base. If you're sort of thinking about it that way.
Goals is an interesting one because he doesn't get the love that a lot of these other guys get. And I always wondered why because I watched him play and he was really good. And I don't think people understand how good he was. And then when you hear other players say it too, like reaffirms my belief. I'm like, the guy was really good, outstanding player. Do you have any of his cards?
So I'm a little bit of like in terms of Premier League, I'm more of a Newcastle fan. My brother is the Man U fan.
That,
He
that's
loves
why
the
he wanted.
team.
That's why he wanted Samu. That's why he wanted Samu from Porto.
Right, right. Well, like you were talking about Alan Shearer, I collect a little bit of him, and
Yeah,
so I don't have any of Scholes' cards, but that is just like another player that I think I just have like really remember. Like you sort of said, I kind of have deep memories of Scholes because he was nasty on the pitch and just did like pretty incredible, memorable things, and he was involved in a lot of really big, big games in the Champions League and things like that. So, I think that's an interesting one. Another one that people.
Roy Keane's another interesting one too.
Well, so it's interesting. He's almost along the lines of like you were saying you were comparing someone to Allen Iverson. To me, it's almost like you could look at him as sort of like a Dennis Rodman or something like
Yeah, yeah.
in terms of, his whole saga with Alfie Holland and like some of the other things that happened in his career and also just like how incredibly good he was, kind of an all-time defender. I think he gets lost because he's an interesting talking head now, but he was you couldn't get by him kind of guy.
Yeah, he's one of the best central defender midfielders ever, without question. But then there's, I bring up Batistuta all the time because people don't realize that he was Argentina's all-time leading scorer until Messi passed him. Not a bad thing to be. Messi passed me. That's the only guy that could pass me, and people don't realize how good he was. You mentioned Totti. We got Pirlo, right? He's in there, although he came a little kind of on the edge of that. Although his rookie's in 98, isn't it? Is Pirlo 98, 97?
That sounds right. I don't want to. Or is it 2000? I don't know, but yeah, that's sometime around that time.
Yeah.
But see, it's interesting. I don't know. I feel like the people who are going to collect those guys are probably collecting them now, unless it's sort of one thing I guess that's interesting is to think about the European market. If some of those collectors start to move away from stickers and get more interested into cards, I know that's an evolution that still hasn't totally
It hasn't
taken
because
place.
they're having what it is because like in Portugal, for example, I was there last summer. I'm going there for Christmas this year, but I saw cards nowhere. I saw stickers everywhere, but no cards. There's a distribution problem that stuff's not getting over there, and maybe that stuff's getting all stuck in Germany or stuck in England or Ireland with the Soccer United guys. They don't want to give it to those other countries. No shot at them, but help those guys out. And because one of the guys that I do know over in Porto who's got it's a Chromo store, which means stickers. He's tried to get Tops to get allocation. They don't even like write him back. And it's really, and I actually got to do him a favor and get in touch with the guy at Tops that I know and let him know that this guy wants allocation. There's a demand for it in Portugal, at least. But the other thing about the European market that have you gone to Europe before?
Yeah, my dad lives in Europe,
Cool.
so I've gotten to spend a lot of time there.
Nice. Where did your dad live?
My dad lives in the Czech Republic, but all growing up, he lived in
Very
Wales. So
cool.
I spent a lot of, and I also like went to, I went spent some time while I was in college in England. So
Very cool. Very
yeah,
cool. I think one of the things that Europe's got an advantage on us here, I think, like you said earlier, we're all parallel and numbered cards hungry, is that you have actual people there that they'll buy your base cards. You know what I mean? Because they're collecting those players. That's a big thing. Uh, and obviously, eventually, they'll probably also kind of mature and understand that these parallels and the numbered cards is where the money's at. But again, mixing money and collectors are two different things, two different sides of the plate. But it's really interesting because I think. And what does your dad have find any cards over there or anything like that?
I mean, so like my parents would, bought me some sticker albums and things when I was there, some like Premier League sticker albums. And I think that I may have gotten some cards. It was funny at the time, like I was interested in baseball cards and basketball cards. That's what I
Yeah,
collected when I was a kid. I didn't really collect soccer at all when I
yeah,
was a kid. I was collecting. Like I said, I had a few stickers and a few other little things. And it was funny because I was playing and all I cared about was soccer. I was watching international soccer. I was playing soccer, but for some reason the cards and the stickers didn't really specifically connect for me, even though I was
mm.
actively collecting when I was a kid as well. It's interesting.
Yeah. It is interesting. I mean, I got my foot in it because of soccer stickers. When my dad would go and he'd come back, he'd bring me back albums and stickers, and you'd stick them in the book and things of that nature. Which is like, man, why did we do that? But that was fun. That was part of the nostalgia piece of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you go back in the '90s, right, and besides that Merlin set that you talked about earlier, what other two or three sets do you think people should take a look at?
It's interesting. Like it's those, like the Calcio sets from 96 to 99 or 2000. All of those are really interesting, right? Like those are a great example of some of those are like really like I don't know. I'm just like here's an R9. Here's like this is a base card,
It's beautiful.
from the 97 Calcio, but like these cards from those Italian issues from the 90s are like really incredibly like almost I guess from a modern perspective I almost say like over designed. I mean the backs are beautiful. That obviously has like a beautiful foils like
Mm,
speckle foil kind of thing. I mean, I love those sets in terms of sort of like from a pure collecting standpoint, but I do think that again, if you start to look back at some of the players we've been talking about, literally almost every player that you and I have spoken about tonight are in those sets, right? Like because
yeah,
like all of those great players are in Serie A in the late 90s for the most part. So, and like we said, I've mentioned it a couple of like the Moody Chromo sets, I think have some very interesting things in them. And I think that some of the ones that have some interesting connections to Messi. I also think that there's Messi cards that are a little slept on in some of those sets. Some of like the later Spanish issues in like 2007, 2008, I think are pretty interesting in and of themselves. I think like again, I think the more eyeballs that are on those sets could see. I don't think I will ever like complete a set. I don't think that's really
me
of
neither.
interest to me. And I'll always think I'll be looking for sets that I respect or that are interesting to me or that are beautiful to me, and then find the players I like in that set. And that'll probably be the way I would always collect. Um, I guess all that to say is like I think that a lot of those Italian issues are, really beautiful. A lot of the French stuff, the foot that we were talking about, like in relationship to the Zidane. I mean, again, you can sort of see who sort of is worthy of an accolade. It's interesting because I feel like soccer is a little bit different. It's sort of like who's the greatest defender of an era, who's the greatest striker, who's the greatest player of a particular country. There's definitely different ways you can chop up, how that goes. I think one thing I've thought about from sort of a dual collecting and investing lane is like outside of rookie cards, what else is someone going to put in a search bar, right? It's sort of like you're going to
Yeah,
put the player and the word rookie, or you're going to put the player and maybe a year that is significant, the year they won the World Cup, the year, so it's like I could see that, it's very interesting to me to focus on You've got your R9 rookies from 94, and there's a couple different issues, but you've also got a lot of really cool cards like from 2002 when he won the World Cup and he won the Ballon d'Or. I mean, to me, that specifically as someone who really is interested in collecting Zidane and, R9 and Henri and some other things, one of the things I've done besides getting their rookie or after I'm done, after I've gotten the rookie, where do I go from there? I look at those years, those other significant years, or where the issue is from. It's the Euro tournament that they won, right? Like stuff like that, I think is another interesting lane, partially just because I think you got to think a little bit about the technology that the buyer is using. And if you're using eBay or whatnot or whatever, your pick your poison, what are you going to type in if you don't know anything? And like part of, I think, our essential bet is that people will know more and will educate themselves and will get excited about this stuff that's a little deeper beyond the surface. But I think the other thing is that people are always going to kind of go to what makes the most sense, right? So I think
Yeah.
that's another fun thing to think about is what
Here's
what
an
moments are connected.
Yeah, here's an interesting thing. I'm gonna do a post this week. Maybe Friday I'll do this one. So there's been 9 players in the history of football that have won the Champions League, the World Cup, and the Ballon d'Or. Did you know that? Only 9 players. Now
I can with you.
that's an elusive club if you think about it. I'm gonna call it the Triple Gold Club. I'm gonna just moniker it now, and I'm gonna copyright that. Maybe I'll just come up with maybe I'll come up with a T-shirt and do a fundraiser or something. But the Triple Gold Club. Let's see if we can nail who these guys are down. Let's see if you can do it.
Beckenbauer,
Yeah,
Dunn,
yeah,
let's see, I guess R9, that's
yeah,
3.
yeah.
Trying to think who else would have won the Ballon d'Or, the World Cup. You've obviously got Messi. So that's 5. There's 9.
No, you got 3. So you got Messi. Who else did you say? You
I said
said
Zidane, Beckenbauer, R9.
Oh, R9 doesn't have a Champions League.
No Champions League final.
Beckenbauer, Zidane. You said did you say Ronaldinho?
Dino's got because he's got the
And
2002
Zidane. So
World Cup.
you got 4. There's 5 left.
Tell me the rest. Who else we got?
Messi, there's 4 left. Messi,
Oh
you
yeah,
got Messi too. So
yeah.
the other 4 are Kaká,
Okay.
Rivaldo, Paulo Rossi, Jared Mueller, and the last one but not least, and this was one that I actually, when somebody asked me this question, I got this one right away. Bobby Charlton.
Huh.
Kind of a guy forgotten, but those are the guys that have done it, and it's pretty impressive. I mean,
It's sort of an indisputable list. Like I like your thought process there. It's kind of like it's even more important than just an MVP because that's sort of those are the accolades that every soccer player would aspire to.
Yes, it surprised me too. Like Rivaldo for me is he's one of the best players I ever saw play too. I just loved watching him, and we kind of forget about Kaká and how good he was. That Brazilian team that won the World Cup, like Kaká, Ronaldinho, and R9 coming at you. Besides the other players they had, come on, it's just incredible, incredible players. But that's something I kind of thought about that recently. I was like, you know what, this might be an interesting kind of way to look at kind of indisputable the guys that have only done this because it's only 9 players. If you think about the history of the game, that's a really short list. Ronaldo could join that list this year. Who else could join that list? Rodri could join that list. For Spain.
That would be interesting.
He's got no value. His cards have no value at all, which is kind of weird because he's a very good player.
Well, what I would say is that's a good reminder that like I think that the type of categorization you're doing is super valuable, but that collecting isn't about stats or numbers or
Yeah.
accolades even necessarily.
Yeah.
It's connected because the people who are the greatest naturally get those things, but obviously it's definitely personality and how it connects. I think what you just brought up is so interesting because I, like you, sort of think that Rivaldo may have been one of the also, like most incredible players I've ever actually seen and got to watch in their absolute prime. And it's interesting to me that like people don't seem to really care about it.
Yeah, they don't care.
His autos aren't particularly expensive. He's just not. It's not a big of a deal to people, and I think it's just because Ronaldinho connected with people on a totally different level because he's sambaing after he scores a goal. And Rivaldo just was a little bit more of a, workhorse in midfield and just was a different player.
Direct kind of player, and he also played with he was there when Figo was there
Yeah.
as well. So it's kind of, that was kind of a good Barcelona team anyways. But in terms of, let me shift a little bit here to modern, right? What are you doing in the modern space? You mentioned that you were buying some of those legend autos, or I don't know if you go into breaks to get those, or what is your take on modern stuff?
I mean, what I would say is,
Or I should say ultra modern. Actually, we'll say ultra modern, right?
yeah, I think like to me, you pointed, because of the theoretical onslaught just keeps coming and those players keep signing. I definitely, from my own PC, one or two audios of some of my favorite players. R9 and Zidane and Henry and Valderrama and Del Piero and a few, and Neymar and a few other ones. So like I like all those just as much as anyone else, I suppose. I just don't see them as an investment particularly, because I just think they're just gonna keep coming. And I think like you can obviously protect yourself by having them in a notable set, whatever, or just sort of like, picking a parallel that is otherwise desired. But to me, I stay away from, if I'm thinking about moving the cart along, a lot of times I feel like autos are pretty difficult, just like you said, because it's just sort of like, once, unless you're selling in sort of the right time in the hype cycle, like you've gotten into a break, you hit the card and you sell it right in the first couple of days. Obviously, that's a great place to be, but you're the risk involved to be able to get to that space generally over time isn't going to work out in your favor. So I'm definitely not sort of playing that game too much. I mean, to me, think you know, like I said, I think the 2014 and 2015, obviously not modern. I think those are interesting sets. Think that you know, to me, I'm most interested when you were talking. This is sort of relates to your question to me about my boundaries. Like, I think that really like stained glass. I also do like kabooms, as unpopular as that might be with certain soccer collectors that I also love and respect. I think those are fun inserts and they look really good in hand. And I just think that what you always have to think back on, in terms of like, if you're thinking a little bit more long term, is like, what will people remember? What will people be
Yeah,
nostalgic for? And one of my guiding principles that I don't know if I've ever said in public is, those on the box, it says to chase for them. One of the reasons you mentioned peacocks, and you were one of the people that put me on. I'm also think that peacocks is an interesting place to take your modern collecting. It says on the international boxes, look for peacocks. It
yeah.
says kabooms on the Donruss box, right? It directs the consumer that is like the cool thing to chase for. I think
Mm.
that's very powerful. One of the things is, I think I'm less interested in sort of some of like the lower numbered parallels and that, and I do like the case hits in modern. That's sort of like where I park my interest there. So that would be something I just think is worth talking about. Is just that that's the most obvious what people remember. I think stained glass is not quite to the extent of kabooms, but
I
I
think
think
I
that
think people probably hate me for this, but I think the stained glass down the road is a better card than the Kaboom. You know,
well, there's a little bit more variation across years, for sure. Like, yeah, I think that I mean, in
they're
hand, another
beautiful.
card just in hand, gorgeous. The stained glasses are really, really pretty in hand.
Yeah, that's kind of what gets me. I don't own any, but that's kind of what gets me like excited is exactly that, because in terms of, yeah, that's gorgeous. Those cards are gorgeous.
Yeah,
They're
so
so
fun.
nice, so nice. Because and I talked to Slabonomics about this, but like today I think there's too many case hits and it loses its like the specialty out of it. You know what I mean? It almost feels like a novelty, like a carnival ride where you just go, or a carnival game where you get a prize anyways. You open a case, you're gonna get
You
one. You know
you
what I
read
mean?
you read Soccer Card United's reviews, where he's like, there's 100, maybe 150 plus, and some of the print runs. When you start to think about it, when you think in the context of numbered cards and everything else, you think, okay, an unnumbered case hit, you know, it's almost like, as you said, when you look at the peacocks, which is sort of like an unnumbered case hit of its own, maybe there's 10, maybe there's
Yeah,
11, whatever. That's truly super rare and super special. Whereas like a kaboom is certainly some of the stained glass print runs are actually pretty low, but depending on the product. But
yeah.
you're not wrong that, that's sort of one of the issues, is that the print runs are pretty high. So they're not actually that rare.
Yeah, like I mean, I opened a box of and I think I said this on the last podcast. I opened a box of Sapphire that my wife bought me a box of Lamine Yamal's rookie year. I wanted to keep it sealed, but I was like, I'm opening this thing. I'm opening this thing. And I pulled a Lamine Yamal image variation, and I pulled the Messi Infinite insert. And I think that insert is beautiful. It's a case hit. It's a beautiful, beautiful case hit. But I think there's probably like more than 75 of those, which is fine because it's Sapphire, right? Sapphire just is just a beautiful product, pretty low print run comparable to the other stuff. So it's a card that I like. I posted on my IG, and then nobody wanted it, so I'm just gonna, you know what? I'm gonna grade it. I'm just gonna keep it. It's a Messi. It's something that might be something down the road. I don't know, but things like that I like, especially if you like the way a card looks, and go for it. The kabooms, I'm kind of one of those guys that says first year kabooms, that's it. That's all I would want. I would want a first year Ronaldo kaboom. That's what I would want. And I think that's a Juventus kit too, right? Isn't it?
No, the
Or is it
Juventus
a
kit I
Portugal
think is the
kit?
second one. It's a Portugal kit in
Okay.
2017. Here's
Yeah,
a
that's gorgeous. That's a nice one.
Pulisic from
That's
2017.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a beautiful card.
Yeah, those are so fun, and you're right. I think those are the ones that are the most interesting. But yeah, I think you're right. Like you've got to certainly be super conscious of the print run and the fact that they're just going to keep making them, right? Like at one point, I think I was thinking to myself, I PC Pulisic a little bit, and I was thinking, no, I'll get the kabooms from, I'll get all the kaboom, I'll get his kaboom run. But
Yeah.
I think I don't know if they've ever made a run of kabooms that he wasn't in. And
Yeah.
I haven't loved all the designs, so I sort of gave that project up, and I've just got a couple. But but the other thing I think that's worth sort of, I don't know, I guess sort of thinking about. I guess I'll give you another one that you've given the people before that I also like is the gamers insert. I'm not trying to
Those
just
things are those
do
things are
show and tell,
awesome.
but here's
Yeah,
the
those are
Pulisic to
awesome.
50. I like
Yeah,
the
the golds
gold.
are the golds are the best.
Yeah. So I have this one, and I also have Latour Martinez in my PC in this
Yeah,
card.
those are the best. Those are the ones I'm
And
trying to buy actually lately.
I really believe, I like you. I sort of think that a lot of people have like cross nostalgia for TCG. I was a little too old for
Me
TCG.
too. Me
My
too.
brother had like original Pokemon and was super into it. So like I kind of saw, my younger brother, I sort of saw him and I was aware of his collection and always thought it was cool, but I'm just don't really know much about Pokemon.
What was the grade on that Pulisic? Was it a 9?
It was a PSA 8. I got smoked on it.
Those are so hard. I have a Desiree Douay that got a 9, but I have no 10s. I have a Pulisic regular one that got a 9,
Hmm.
and I
I feel
got
like the
the other.
guys at PSA don't realize that they're supposed to be rounded corners.
Yeah, it could be either that
I'm
or
just
just,
kidding.
or just. But but it's not a bad thing because like you kind of don't want again, people could kill me for this, but when you have all these PSA 10s, you kind of lose. It's kind of like the Zidane you have up there, right? The Ruby, or is it? You said it's a 5, right, or a 6?
Yeah, it's a PSA 5. There is no PSA.
Yeah, so there you go. PSA 10s are irrelevant when it comes to certain cards. If you have a PSA 10 out there, okay, then it's relevant. At that point, it doesn't matter. The card's in the slab. It is what it is, and they just didn't grade that high, and that's why I look at gem rates a lot. I think that are important, um, especially if you see ones with 0% gem rate. It's like, well, guess what? It's like the R9 sticker. You know that no PSA 10s have ever sold ever. I'm like, why is somebody holding those? Somebody's holding those for a reason, you know, and so yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, we're so conditioned to the whole PSA 10 number, and I'm actually glad to see that the raw sales are starting to sell for less than the PSA 9s again, which is really good. It's good for the hobby, and I just don't think people realize that they'll be like, oh, that's a 9. Nah, I don't want it. No, you probably want the 9. Trust me. Because sometimes stuff it's like like those perfect examples right there. Those gamers cards, they're not 10s, but they're awesome. So
Right. I can't, there's many times it's difficult to detect why something is a 9 or a 10. So, yeah, I'm certainly, at least for myself, I'm not particularly concerned about it. But I know, and I think that sentiment kind of continues to grow because everyone sort of, if you're in the hobby long enough, you understand that like the difference between a 9 or 10 is sometimes total, just arbitrary, but sort of like,
yeah,
obviously for resale, you'd love it to be a 10, but in
and
terms of
that's
the
that's
actual condition of the what I actually care about is how does the card look? How does the card present? If I can't discern anything, even if I'm looking at it as closely as could be, then it's not going to bother me. I don't really care what PSA said or not. But for myself, at least, or for my
Yeah, and
what I
that's the funny part of the soccer side, right? Because I dabble, like I said, in the hockey side. You see cards that are sevens and eights sell for major money because
because like the cup and all that stuff is super thick, right? So there's of
yes,
course
yeah,
those
super
grades are
thick
terrible.
cards. Yep, yep. So it becomes irrelevant. Like I said, it's irrelevant. You know what I mean? Sometimes an eight is the only eight around. Everything else is a seven. So I think our again, it's just part of the soccer hobby maturing a little bit. Like that Nevs I have from Immaculate. The guys at Golden looked at it when I was at Soko, and the guy was like, "This is probably gonna 10." And I'm like, yeah, maybe. I got to send it in, but I actually sold my one of one select on gold and it closed last weekend. I don't know if you saw the sale.
I heard you talking about it. I was following along. I've sold also the one of one I've hit. I've also sold it on Golden, so I was curious to see how yours did, and I was excited for you. It looked like it went pretty good.
Yeah, almost 5K,
Yeah,
crazy
it's awesome.
for Nevs. And then it was funny because about 2 days before, the one of one auto was on eBay in a PSA 9 that sold for $2,400 on eBay. I guess Golden's got that capability with that elite auction to make things kind of, you get a little bit more money out of it. I don't know.
It's actually that's an interesting data point to think about the desirability of the auto and the base one of one.
You're probably right. It's kind of like one of those things where you ask yourself, would you rather have the one of one in a PSA 10 or the PSA 9 one of one auto?
Right. I think
A sticker auto.
with autos, I think for me, as a collector, it's desirable to get of my very favorite players, at least an auto of theirs, but it's almost totally irrelevant to me if it's to 50 to 25 to 10. I mean, I really don't, I know one of ones are a different game, but to me, it's almost irrelevant. So that's like an auto is an auto. Like if the car, it's a cool card and it's
Mm,
got an auto, then it is that to me. Whereas I think there is with like a field level one of one without an auto, I think is in many cases a much more desirable car. So I think that's
yeah.
pretty interesting that it almost doubled, you almost doubled the other one of ones.
Basically, yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I didn't want to sell it, but I looked at that and I looked at the other two cards that I have. Well, I have the gold and the 9 auto and I have the regular gold and then I have the gold wave grading. And I'm like, I just love these gold cards so much more than that black card for me to look at, you know what I mean? Gold to me.
Absolutely.
So, it was kind of an easy decision. And I'm kind of, and I've said this before, I'm using that to leverage to buy the rookie badge one, you know what I mean? In Elite Donruss, which people want crazy money. So it's kind of like, do I just go out and buy boxes and just try to find one? You know what I mean? And really risk it. But before I mean, I feel like I could talk to you about this stuff. I almost said the S word. Good thing I didn't say that. I feel like I could continue to talk about this all night long, but I know it's 11 o'clock here. We probably all have to work in the morning, so it's easy to talk to you about this stuff. It's great. I'm glad you came on. I really appreciate the time that you spent, and I know you're an attorney, and I know you guys are usually pretty expensive. So I'm glad I got this for free. That's a
This
big
has
thing
been
for
great.
me.
I want to say I've always appreciated your content. I've been a listener since I discovered you probably about a year ago. And I've always thought that you had great insight. So it's a pleasure to be here. I'd love to do it again sometime. And yeah, it's been a great chat.
We'll definitely do it again sometime. And then you're probably not coming to New Jersey, obviously. So what's after the Culture Collision show? Anything coming up for you later on in the
I
year, or
mean,
is it?
specifically coming up, one thing I would say is hit me up if you're coming down to CCR7 in Atlanta. I'll definitely be at that
Yeah,
game
that's
between
right.
US and Portugal. So, love to see you. I couldn't be more excited. There's 7 World Cup games coming to Atlanta, so I'll try to be at most of those. I'm super pumped about sort of this upcoming year of soccer. I think I'm absolutely going to be at SoCo and the National next year. Without a doubt, that was an incredible experience for me, and I can't wait to sort of meet you in person next year. And like I said, if you come down to Atlanta, like I'll definitely would love to meet up. Maybe we could rip
Awesome,
some
awesome.
cards in the Benz or something. I've done that with some other. I'm also like an
Yeah,
Atlanta United season ticket holder, and I've tried to meet up with some of my card guys who are into MLS and stuff. So
I've been to that stadium. It's a nice stadium. I've been there for a Patriots game before.
Nice.
Patriots and the Falcons game. It's
But I
funny because you just said the Portugal US game. So I didn't realize Ronaldo has not been played in the US in 11 years.
Yeah.
That's so crazy.
Crazy.
You know, I read something the other day and I was like, 11 years? Can you imagine? I mean, maybe that's the run up we're seeing is because people anticipating them playing here, next summer. Part of it, right? Kind
Yeah.
of both of these guys last. And that the last thing I'll ask you, right, is like, so for me, we were talking about unique cards earlier. Like that Ronaldo Lamine Yamal card is really unique to me. The tops now, I actually bought a few of those to
Yo,
have. Cards like that are really interesting to me. And a lot of people don't value those very much. What do you think about cards like that? Kind of that, like, is it kind of gimmicky or you think it's like they're cool?
I love it. To me, I think that the tops now really connects to sort of what I was saying about like specific moments. I mean, that there's nothing cool. There's nothing that's more connected to the moments than those. And that was a particularly, their whole exchange was very noteworthy, and sort of the way that Lamine
Mm,
handled it got spoken about in the press. So I think it's interesting that it's commemorated on a card. And to me, I think that the top, like a numbered tops now card is a really cool thing to me, no doubt. I mean, again, I'm not trying to say that I'm not interested in the base cards, but I occasionally buy like tops now related to Atlanta United. We had a really bad season, so there hasn't been much to buy this year. But so I've always thought that the tops now are pretty entertaining, and I sort of like it as a concept. I think that they'll have some, for the most iconic of moments. I think that they're, the people will stay interested in them. I went to a couple of Copa America games and I saw Messi play, and Latoro Martinez, who's another guy who I think is a kind of an interesting modern player to
underrated,
look at.
underrated,
Yeah, I
underappreciated.
mean, I think he's got a chance at the Golden Boot at the World Cup potentially.
Yeah, yeah.
And no one's talking about him.
You
But
know what they should do? They should do a retro. Well, it would be Panini, but like a retro Panini instant, and they could do a Zidane Materazzi moment.
I mean, I we got the top's finest dual auto of the two of them here,
Yeah,
which to me is like
that's a cool card.
that's my favorite ultra modern card in my collection, no doubt. I can't believe that it got through tops, whatever the lawyers or whoever would have approved that. I'm certain Zizou and his people wouldn't have approved it because he actually doesn't like Materazzi, but a
Well, they
great
still
card.
don't. I thought they talked to each other now. No, they still don't, huh?
I,
Interesting.
I've always that's sort of a story I've tried to keep abreast of. I've always wondered if there was going to be like a reconciliation, but I don't
Interesting.
think so.
I kind of like that actually.
Me too.
I think
He disrespected his family and he embarrassed him on the world's largest stage, and just never forgive him. I'm fine with that.
I think sports has lost a little bit of that. That's the thing. You know what I mean? So I kind of like that he stuck to his guns. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah.
It's very cool. Anyways, I really appreciate your time, man. Thank you so much. I'll definitely have you on again.
This
We'll
has been
probably
fantastic.
catch up. We should probably catch up in like a few months and see where the Ronaldo and the Messi market's at, and say, oh man, it's even higher or it's lower.
It's going to be, I
Slabanot.
think, one of the things I think's cool about what you've done is that you've made certain predictions and you've sort of talked about certain players, and then you've kind of said, "Hey, a year later, let me look back and see what I said and look what's happened." And I think it is fun to kind of draw some lines in the sand and say, this is what I see. And I definitely think it's going to be fun to sort of see where this all goes. And what's almost the most interesting is I think it sort of feels pretty clear that those markets are definitely maturing and maybe have changed levels, or at least the floor may have raised on many of those
Mhm.
cards. We're certainly on an upward cycle, and it's not always going to be that way. If you've been around in the hobby a little bit, you know that.
Yeah, we know that.
But maybe the floor will be a little higher, which is always exciting. But I think what's most exciting is to think about what else is going to be affected, right? Or what else collectors or the ultimate broadening of the base will do. And that's where I think you and Slabonomics conversation about CR7 is very interesting. And I think then you got to start thinking about what else is out there and who else might make an impact in the World Cup. There's also, obviously different levels of prospecting, but I think it's going to be it's a really fun time to be in our space because I think that it feels like this is a little bit more sustainable and that there's a little bit more liquidity. And I think that's a fun thing to see where that liquidity goes and
I agree. I think that's
how we
been
can
the
have the most
theme.
fun with it.
I think that's a theme I've seen the last few episodes with Slabonomics, with Tyler from Card Talk, and now yourself, where we're seeing it's different this time. It's not like COVID where people got excited and then they left the hobby. So I think it's very different. But man, again, pleasure. 11:09. You should probably go to bed. You probably got to deal with some very important things tomorrow, as I do. Not as important as you, but I'll get this. You'll probably be listening to this on Thursday morning, fellas. All of you out there, thank you, and good night, guys.